Hi everybody, hope your day's going well, but whether it is, whether it isn't, it's about to get better because we are going to try the Balvenie Doublewood 12. So this is a single malt Scotch from the Balvenie. It's 12 years old and it's called Doublewood because they age this stuff in two different types of oak barrels, what they call a traditional oak barrel and then sherry oak barrel. So one reason I chose this bottle for this point in the Whiskey Advent calendar is because we are sort of going to transition with the scotches that we're trying into sherried scotches. So far, we have not had any sherried scotches at all. And what says Christmas and holiday time to me when it comes to booze, like if I want to have a drink during like a Christmas dinner or just like a cold winter night, leading up to Christmas, for some folks it's rye whiskey. For me, it's sherried Scotch. A little bit darker than some of the other Scotches that we had. So let's open this up, give it a nose, give it a taste, see what we think. So, ooh, I can already smell this stuff. It smells rich. So one thing I like to look at with Scotch right off the bat that I don't always like to look at with bourbon is the color, because bourbon by law cannot have anything added to it, so it can't have added color. Scotch, weirdly enough, it can. There's a specific coloring agent that's allowed to be added to it and you can still call it Scotch. And what you want to look for on your bottles to see whether it has any of that coloring added to it is, natural coloring or no coloring added or something like that. I don't see that anywhere here. And it does look a little bit dark. And you expect some scotches that are aged in, ex-sherry oak to be a little bit darker. But 12 years is a little bit on the younger side of what you might expect to see a lot of deep color in. So my guess would be, since this doesn't seem to say that it doesn't have any coloring added, and it does seem, a little darker than I would expect for most 12-year-olds, that it probably does have color added to it to make this look a little richer, a little darker. But let's not let that determine whether this is good Scotch or not. Let's give it a smell, give it a taste, see what we think. Okay, so on the on the nose, I'm not picking up really a lot of sherried notes. It's more like traditional, like really malt forward is what I'm getting in this, and then maybe a subtle hint of like some kind of dry fruit. It's not really like a dustiness. Like you get this like kind of old, almost like a dank note when you're smelling, when you're tasting some sherried scotches. I'm not getting that on this. Maybe like a hint of dried red fruit or dark fruit, like raisins or maybe figs or something like that. But really, it's very malt forward. So this is so far, I think, going to be a really good transition from a standard Scotch to sherried Scotches. Let's taste it. Yeah, you definitely get a lot more sherry on the palate right away. So that's so weird. So it smelled really malt forward to me. But tasting it, it's right away fruit, like plum. I get plum, leaving the raisin behind. It's so weird how it's so subtle on the nose, but it's like right up front on the palate, like sherry. This tastes just like a sherry whiskey. This wasn't a good one to kind of bridge the gap. This tastes just at first like some kind of bright red fruit or berry or something like that, and then it gets a little bit more bitter on the back end. It leads more to like maybe like a plum or a prune or something like that is what I'm left with. But it's very not biting at all. This is probably chill filtered would be my guess, because it's not advertising that it's not, and there's not, you know, a ton happening on my tongue. It's just this kind of, I don't want to say basic because that sounds bad, but kind of a simple but good fruit forward Scotch, sherried Scotch. I like this. Yeah, I mean, the more I drink it, the more it's making me, when I smell it, picking up on more of those sherry notes, and I'm almost getting a little bit on the top of my palate, a little bit of that dustiness, sort of that aged. It's like a weird funkiness that you first pick up on, I think, when you're trying sherried scotches, that is hard to really pin your finger, pin down exactly what it tastes like. But for me, it's like dried fruits, like raisins, prunes, sometimes plum if it's a little bit sweeter, which it started off as. But at the top of the palate, the more I drink this, the more I'm getting that dried fruit and maybe a bit of a dustiness, and that's showing up a lot more on the nose for me now too. So like tasting it, and I think this is common, maybe not for everyone, but certainly for me, like getting experiences tasting it then affects how I smell it. And if I'm going to taste something and I'm not breathing in at all, for example, it's not, or my nose is like plugged because I'm sick or something like that, it's not going to taste the same. I'm not going to get the same experience. But kind of blending those together gives a more rounded experience for me for tasting any of this stuff. And the more I smell this, the more I drink it, the more this is coming off as a traditional sherried Scotch, maybe with the edges rounded a little bit more with sweetness, like a honeyed sweetness, which I think is kind of signature for the Balvenie. So I like this. I like it a lot. I think you can find this at most places for around $60. So that's expensive. Not expensive. That's a little higher up there for a bourbon. For a Scotch, like a quality single malt, that's probably around the lowest you can expect to spend for a quality one. Glenmorangie's an exception for a quality single malt, especially one that's sherry, that has some pretty heavy sherry influence. This is a pretty good value, I'd say, for around $60. So I hope you like it too. If you do, it's the Balvenie, they do some weird stuff. They make a lot of product. They have a lot of limited releases and a lot of more aged releases that go for quite a bit of money. So if money's no object for you and you like the Doublewood 12, just go straight to the Doublewood 17. They do have a 17-year-old version of this Scotch. I've not tried it. I imagine it's pretty good. Higher ages with sherried Scotches are generally up my alley, so I think I'd like it a lot. Maybe you would too. I don't know the ABV on that one though. In this one, I don't think I even mentioned that. It's 43%. So if you like this, but particularly you like the sherry side of it, like you want to really dive into that sherry experience, and I'd recommend this one here. This is another Balvenie. It's the Balvenie 15 single barrel sherry cask. So it's a single barrel product. Everything in this bottle is taken from one barrel, so different bottles from different barrels might taste different, but it's a little more age on it. It's definitely more sherry, higher ABV. This one's at 47.8, but each barrel will vary. But if you really want to lean into that, I think this is a good way to do it, to just really compare and see what difference the different types of barrels make. I'd also recommend, if you really like this, and I think this is going to be something that's common as we go through some of these more sherried Scotches, is give a brand called the Glendronach a try. They've been through some recent changes where they're going to start chill filtering, I believe, and possibly adding color, which isn't great. But you should still be able to find at least the 12-year-old version of these bottles. This is the 21 and the 18 right here. You should be able to find the 12-year-old. I forget what color the label is. I think it's a red label. at most liquor stores. I don't think you'll find it in a grocery store. And I do think they're still selling the bottlings that are non-chill filtered with no color added. Look for that. That should be a really good one to grab. Well, I hope you liked this. I certainly did. It was a pleasant surprise, even though it wasn't exactly what I intended. And I hope it's getting you a little bit more in the Christmas spirit. Cheers. We'll see you tomorrow.